You know those times in your life where you're just having a great day, and then some little thing happens, like the computer freezes, or someone cuts you off in traffic, or someone speaks to you with a certain tone of voice, and all of a sudden you're like Cro-Magnon woman. Oh, I want to kill this person. And you're like, ooh, who's that? We're going to talk about what happens in the brain when you all of a sudden go into a trigger state, and how do you deal with that? How do you get back to your mature self? That guy who dumped me on prom night, I bumped into him when I'm like 30, and I wanted him to still feel bad for that. It's like, who ends up losing out of that? I do, because I'm holding on to this thing. He didn't even remember me from high school. Stories, because they felt like a person. They felt like they were seen. One little habit totally changed the environment for customer service as well as for each other. This could be a useful thing to think about when you do have a clash with somebody. That usually, if you can make it through the other end, you grow as a person, and they grow as a person. It could be a real gift. Just like an artist will look at a lump of clay and see an incredible statue, or a potist will look at it and see a beautiful pot. Or somebody who's a gardener, I'm sure some of you are gardeners, that the best flowers come out of the darkest soil full of you-know-what. So out of the dark and the negativity come often the greatest things. And if you think about the people in your life who you feel most trusting towards, that are closest to you, that you feel like you could call on in a challenge, I would venture a guess that you have gone through conflict with that person and come out successfully on the other side. That you've gone to a place where it could have been that you decided to walk away from each other and go, you know what, you're just a jerk, I'm never dealing with you again. But you chose to come back and go, this relationship is important enough for me to risk conflict and get through the other side so that we both grow out of that opportunity. Like there's a sense of trust that the person's going to be there even if it's rough times. That they're not going to walk away from you even if you blow up one day or you don't see things the same way. That you could bring that to them and they would go to the table with you and find a way out. They're not going to walk away. And so sometimes we don't have trust, we don't feel close to people, we don't feel part of a community because we haven't been willing to risk some conflict.
I find that if you manage to convince them that it's their own idea, they're really a lot easier to get them to do something.
Right, so if you convince them that it's their idea, they're way more willing to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a good tip. If you take away nothing else, if you wanted to write something down in your habit, that's a really great habit to have around staying curious, is that as soon as somebody says something that you disagree with, because quite frankly, I wouldn't paint the room orange. But I may discover that me and Jeannie both want a warm room. But I can't get there until I ask the question, what's important to you about, and take off the layers, because we come up with ideas based on deeper values. So get down to the values. What is it about? And then fill in the blank. So, for example, many years ago when I was moving into an apartment with my boyfriend, he went to a garage sale and he brought home a carpet for the hardwood floor. And it was, and I think of this now because of what you said, it was an orange shag rug. And he put it out on the floor and he said, "Isn't that fabulous?" And I said, "So what's important to you about an orange shag rug with beer stains on it for the living room?" And he said, "Well, it's warm and it's, you can lie on it on a cold winter day and it'll, muffle sound and everything." And so all those things were important to me. And we got down to the deeper level. Instead of me going, "You have no taste," which is what I wanted to say right off the bat. So what is important to you about whatever it is, good habit to keep? Every time you catch me doing something right, as your boss, you write it down, and anytime I catch you doing something right, I'll write it down and give you the note. And she looked at me like I was really weird. And she said, "Okay." And it was hard at first because, you know, she wasn't doing too much right. And so I didn't know what to do. And one day she came, I think it was like 40 minutes late. So I went, "You showed up." She laughed, you know, and she put it in her little envelope. But each day I would just find one thing, because obviously there were things that she was doing, and I would just write them, even if they were really minor and really small. And after a while, this seemed to calm her down, and it seemed to improve her confidence to the point where it improved her productivity. And what I did notice was that she was really good with people. So if someone would come over, she'd start chit-chatting and build rapport. So I thought, you know, I'm going to put her on the phones. So I put her on the phone and making research calls and taking calls. And one day I had to go out, and she started talking to this woman all about waterless cookware and how to get a 3-year-old potty trained and all kinds of personal things that they had in common. And the woman was so taken with her that she says, "I don't really know what it is that your boss does, but just let me know and I'll hire her." And she had overheard what I was talking about and explained it in a really good way. So I decided to put her on sales, which is not what I brought her in for, but she was really good at that. And so I was able to write her quite a nice testimonial letter and send her on her way for her next assignment. So off she went to her next assignment at the end and gave her a big hug. And we sort of kept up for a few years, but then I didn't hear from her for a while. And about 5 years later, I'm walking in downtown Vancouver, and I see this woman walk by, and she's got like a gray suit on with a crimson piping and a leather briefcase, talking on her cell phone. And it was her. And I said, "Helen, what's going on for you?" And she said, "Oh, well, I got a job eventually as a receptionist in a PR company, and they liked what I did, and so I've moved up, and I'm actually apprenticing in PR." And she said, "It's so funny that I should bump into you, because I wanted to show you in my briefcase, I keep all these little blue notes you gave me." She said, "I have them in a little folder here." And she goes, "I pull them out and I read them, even the one that says, 'You showed up.'" It's funny. And I would just read them whenever I was feeling down, and it was my first positive work experience that I'd ever had. I wanted to appreciate you for that. So she took me out for lunch. And it made me realize that something that took me a minute at the end of every day and hardly cost anything made a huge impact in someone's life.